2 ships, 15 sailors. And the President of the United States said, "Don't rush me." If that sentence doesn't stop you cold, consider this. Those ships were seized inside the Strait of Hormuz, the same waterway Trump claimed the United States has total control over. And the White House said it wasn't even a ceasefire violation. If you want to understand what's actually happening versus what's being announced, stay with this. It matters more than the headlines suggest. It has now been 55 days since Operation Epic Fury began on February 28th. The war between the United States and Iran is not over. It is not paused. It is suspended in something far stranger, an indefinitely extended ceasefire with no deadline, no timeline, and no agreement on the one thing this entire conflict is actually about: Iran's nuclear program. Trump extended the ceasefire on Tuesday evening through a Truth Social post. He said the extension came at Pakistan's request. He used the word indefinitely. The ceasefire that was supposed to last 2 weeks, that expired on April 21st, now has no expiration date. And within hours of that announcement, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps moved. IRGC speedboats approached the container ship MSC Francesca in the Strait of Hormuz, opened fire, and boarded it. Iranian forces then seized a second cargo vessel, the Al-Mameyandas, in the same waterway. A third ship was attacked, but not taken. 15 Filipino seafarers were confirmed safe by the Philippine government, the first external confirmation that IRGC personnel had boarded and seized both vessels with armed force. 3 ships, 1 morning, the day after the ceasefire was extended indefinitely. Share this right now, because what happens next in this strait affects oil prices, global shipping, and the negotiation that is supposed to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran. Trump was asked about it directly in the Oval Office. He was asked whether 2 seized ships and a fired-upon third constituted a ceasefire violation. He said, "Don't rush me. I don't want to rush myself. There is no time pressure." His press secretary, Karoline Leavitt, said the seizures were not violations because these were not American ships. These were not Israeli ships. These were international vessels. She also said in the same briefing that Iran had gone from having the most lethal navy in the Middle East to acting like a bunch of pirates. Pause on that. The official American position on Thursday was this: Iran is committing piracy inside the geographic zone the ceasefire is supposed to govern, and that is not a ceasefire violation. The ceasefire is intact. Iran is acting like pirates. There is no time pressure. Don't rush me. Now, here's what neither government publicly confirmed, but what the New York Times and NBC News independently reported from people inside the negotiations. The United States asked for a 20-year suspension of uranium enrichment. Iran offered 3 to 5 years. The U.S. asked for the physical removal of all highly enriched uranium from Iranian territory. Iran offered monitored downblending, mixing high-enriched material with lower-enriched material to reduce potency without removing it from the country. A U.S. government assessment of Operation Midnight Hammer, the strikes on Iran's nuclear sites in June 2025, found that only 1 of Iran's 3 main nuclear facilities was destroyed. Trump called it a complete and total obliteration. The assessment says 1 of 3. The enriched uranium is still in Iran. The centrifuge infrastructure at 2 of 3 sites survived. That is the documented gap between the claim and the reality. And then Secretary of State Rubio said something on Thursday that has not received the attention it deserves. He said Iran can have a civilian nuclear energy program, just not a military weapons program. That is a significant shift. Trump said no enrichment, period. Vance said Iran cannot have the tools that quickly enable a nuclear weapon. The White House called enrichment a red line the president will not back away from. But Rubio said civilian nuclear energy. The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty permits enrichment up to 3.67% for civilian power generation. Iran has been enriching to 60%, a level with no civilian application, sitting just below the 90% threshold for weapons-grade material. If Rubio's formulation is now the American negotiating floor, the enrichment gap has shifted from 0 versus 60% to 3.67% versus 60%. And Iran has already agreed to downblend. Rubio may have moved the American position without announcing that he moved it. That single paragraph could be the most important development of this entire week. And then there is the question of money. Trump said on Tuesday he is considering unfreezing $20 billion in Iranian assets, a figure CNN reported the administration is actively evaluating. For reference, the $6 billion unfrozen during the Biden years became one of the most explosive political controversies of that presidency. The number being discussed now is more than 3 times larger. Add that to a civilian nuclear program acknowledged by Rubio, a ceasefire extended indefinitely at Pakistan's request, and a president who says, "Don't rush me," and you are not looking at a maximum pressure campaign building toward military resumption. You are looking at a negotiation that has moved from dramatic to slow, from deadline to indefinite, from Islamabad to wherever Iran decides to send its next proposal. Iran has not sent that proposal yet. The Lebanon dimension of this conflict moved to a new phase on Thursday that the Iran nuclear coverage largely buried. Israeli and Lebanese ambassadors held their second round of direct talks at the State Department, the second direct engagement between the two countries in 3 decades. Trump announced the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire covering Hezbollah's operations would be extended by 3 weeks. He said he wants Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and Lebanese President Aoun to meet at the White House. He also said the United States will help Lebanon protect itself from Hezbollah, while simultaneously confirming that Israel will defend itself if targeted, a statement that extends the ceasefire and preserves Israel's right to end it unilaterally in the same sentence. Hezbollah fired rockets into northern Israel the same day. The ceasefire extension and the rocket attack happened within the same news cycle. Then consider who else entered this story on Thursday. Pope Leo XIV, returning from an 11-day pastoral visit to Africa, told journalists aboard the papal flight that he had expressed deep concern about the war to Trump and called on both parties to stop the spiral of violence before it becomes an irreparable abyss. Trump said he was not a big fan of Leo and that the Pope should stay out of politics. Here is what makes that exchange more than a headline. Pope Leo XIV is the first American pope. He is speaking to every Catholic government in Latin America, Europe, and the Philippines simultaneously. The same Philippines whose 15 seafarers are currently being held aboard seized vessels by IRGC forces in the Strait of Hormuz. The Pope's own parishioners are on those ships. And Trump said, "Don't rush me." The economic cost of "don't rush me" is where geopolitics becomes personal. Trump said Americans should expect higher gas prices for a little while. The trade-off, he said, is preventing Iran from having a nuclear weapon. A little while has now been 55 days. 12 ships crossed the Strait of Hormuz per day, compared to 150 before the war began. The International Transport Workers Federation has received 1,900 requests for assistance from stranded seafarers and their families since February 28th. The Airports Council International Europe warned of systemic jet fuel shortages within weeks. The Asian Development Bank projected slower regional growth and rising inflation across Asia-Pacific. Trump's domestic approval rating was 35% when the ceasefire was first announced and has not recovered. Gas above $4 is not a little while problem. It is a midterm election problem. And it is compounding every day the Strait remains contested and the negotiations remain indefinite. Here is what the documented record shows 55 days into this war. Both sides have outlasted 5 American-imposed deadlines. Iran's government is functioning despite Trump's description of fractured leadership. The enriched uranium is still in Iran. 2 of 3 nuclear sites survived the strikes. The IRGC has speedboats in Hormuz and rifles on the MSC Francesca. The naval blockade has turned around 31 ships, most of them oil tankers. Hormuz is not fully open. Iran's moderates have not submitted a proposal. Iran's hardliners are seizing cargo ships with armed personnel. And the specific event that breaks this standoff, whether a diplomatic proposal from Tehran or an IRGC action in the Strait that makes "don't rush me" impossible to sustain, has no documented answer today. We verify every claim against the documented record and update this analysis daily. Drop your position in the comments. Every response is read, and the sharpest analysis gets featured. Now answer this. If Rubio's civilian nuclear acknowledgement and Iran's downblending offer represent real movement from both sides, is there a deal in the space between those two positions? And what does it actually require in specific technical terms to close it? And is the event that finally breaks this standoff more likely to come from a diplomatic proposal out of Tehran or from an IRGC action in the Strait that forces the president's hand? If you are tracking this conflict with the same precision we are, subscribe. We cover what the statements don't say.